Back. Let's pick up from where we left off. We were talking about earlier that the Labour Court will will make a decision on the strike, whether it will go ahead on Friday, that is in the banking sector. And I was speaking earlier here to Derek Cikes, asking him about Fintech and whether or not it's contributing towards the threat of jobs in the banking sector. Derek, as you were speaking earlier, I asked you if Fintech was the enemy of jobs.
Sure. I'm not sure if it's the enemy of jobs, but it's the evolution of how things are working, right? When you talk about fintech's probably focused on a couple of different areas. The first is, how do you change the way people bank today? How do you change the way people shop today? It's focused on how do you support the businesses that are doing those things. So it's not just purely, how do you sell or bank differently. It's also how do you process in the background and do those kind of things. So there's a lot of investment, a lot of time being put into that.
As a result, banks shut their doors and retrenched people.
Well, yes. We've both been part of the banking world and using banking services for the better part of a couple of decades. I'm not trying to show off your age or anything, but the reality is that I remember when I first got my first paycheck, you had to take the paycheck to the bank. They had to cash it and you would walk out with the cash. That doesn't happen anymore. It's now electronically put into your bank account and you can draw the money from any ATM. So things are changing, and that does mean impact on jobs.
So the rollout of digital banking has, as a result, improved efficiency in terms of how banking is done and provided convenience for the customer and for the banks. But the employees here feel that their jobs are under threat, and evidence is right there.
Well, I don't think you can say that they're not under threat. Jobs are under threat, and that's the march of evolution, right? Like I was saying earlier, in Switzerland in the early 18th and 19th centuries, everyone wanted to be a watchmaker. The Japanese invented the digital watch, and there was no more jobs for people making watches. And that's the kind of thing that's starting to happen here. And I think that's the challenge for us as South Africans, is to see how we can take the existing skills and capabilities and how we bring that into what the future looks like in terms of the way the future consumer is going to be operating.
So what's your interpretation of this strike? Shouldn't banks move with the times?
I think it's difficult for banks. They've got two objectives, right? They've got a profit motive for their shareholders, and then they've got a people motive for the people that work for them. And I think it's a balancing act that they've got to get right. How do you grow into the future so that somebody's not going to come and change the market under your feet, and then you lose all your employees? And how do you make sure that you don't do things that risks jobs? And I think that's the constant balance that's got to be found in the banking space, or in any of the spaces that are getting affected by digital transformation.
Given that digitization is a movement from the third industrial revolution, now one can imagine if digitization in its form can be rolled out very quickly and get to a point whereby everything would not be done through a bank branch, and you would not need any transaction through human interaction. What are the banking employees going to do, and how is this strike going to help?
Well, I think there's a little bit of good news for the banking employee, because the reality is the market doesn't change overnight. The market evolves. So if you take the South African market right now, 24% of the market, which we spoke about previously, are people that were born and have always had cell phones or always had the internet around them. The rest of the market is getting older and exiting and retiring. And so you're going to have this change over time of how the market looks. So there's always place for people that want to go to the bank branch now, and there's the people that don't want to. So, and I think that's the balance that the banks have got to get right, is how do you manage both of those worlds? One of the things that we do as a business is we're trying to respond to how the market is changing in terms of new purchase behavior, which is, I see it, I want it now. So we've got the ability as Payflex to offer people the ability to buy what they want and then spread that payment over time.
For somebody who's preparing their T-shirt for Friday morning saying, we are going to strike and through this revolution, we want to secure a job, do you think it's feasible to go on strike?
I think we're bringing in a number of other conversations that are happening on a larger platform within South Africa right now. We've got a massive difference between the 1% and the 99% of South Africa. And so I think it becomes difficult as a corporate to stand up there and say, well, we're going to reduce jobs so that we can maintain our 5 billion rand profit margin. There's got to be a bit of give and take here. And I think there's an onus and a responsibility of the banks to say, well, how do we do both of these things at the same time?
So should banks slow down the process so that they can safeguard the jobs temporarily?
You can't do that because there are a number of entrepreneurs out there that are starting up new look banking businesses. So Time Bank is coming down the line, Discovery Bank is coming down the line, and then there's a number of other entrepreneurs that we haven't even started speaking about or been introduced yet, who've come up with a better way of doing these things. And that's going to be the thing that if you don't pay attention to, you're going to get caught out as a bank. But if you don't take care of your staff, you're going to be faced with strikes and unhappy customers. So
it's a question of eat or be eaten.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, thank you very much for making time to speak to us.
Thank you.
All right, Derek Cikes, of course, is the founder of a finance company that is Payflex, who is a commercial director there, talking to us about whether or not fintech is a threat to jobs. And of course, we will take this discussion further